since the first time I met with you, you talked about you when you said that you wanted to play professional baseball, you only put the name of the city. You didn't put the specific address. And I can tell by all the things that you've done in the past year that your level of intention amplified in its specificity, in the specifics of it, right? And now everything that you said that you were going to do when I interviewed you 2 years ago at my house, you've done, put it into play. What did you learn in the chase of the baseball dream with not the specific enough destination that like recentered your mind into, okay, this is chapter 2 or 3 of my life, and I am going to turn the volume up on my intention and my specific desires?
Well, so yeah, that was a big lesson for me that I'm still kind of learning. And literally, as we're sitting here recording this today, I just got back from DC at the National Prayer Breakfast where we heard Jordan Peterson speak, and it was Virgil. It was not a traditional keynote by him. Like it was literally like we watched him critically think for an hour. Like when he walked on the stage, he looked like Dr. Emmett Brown from Back to the Future with his hand on his forehead like this. And he was critically thinking through these pieces of the Bible. And about 80% of the audience, he lost them in the first 10 minutes. Again, it wasn't a traditional keynote, but like I was sucked in because I was watching a genius think and work through things. And that's what makes him different than everybody else and why he is where he is, because he does that and most of us don't. And I'm learning to see value in that, and I'm learning to do that. So I learned to question things, to understand the root reasons why they exist at the foundational level and all that stuff. It's just, can you overthink things? Maybe, maybe not. I guess it's what you do with the information, right? So to answer your question, I have a theory, and as you've seen it a million times, there's guys that should be playing in the PGA right now that just didn't. God gave them all the gifts, and it just didn't work out. So what we saw in that person, if they had saw it in themselves, it would have worked out. They didn't see themselves. They're not going to outlive their own self-image. Their self-image wasn't in line with what all the rest of us saw. And that's why they're making decisions that are going even further off that path. I mean, we could get in the weeds on that in a hurry. I don't want to bore everybody to death.
Sure.
But you know what I'm saying? Like you just have to question things, and trust is earned. And especially with the media and everything else over the last 4 or 5 years, it's like, man, like there's a lot of information, and how do we know what's trustworthy sources? And then more importantly, like how do we know what to believe? Because what we believe is based on information.
Yeah. You know, the self-image is a very interesting animal because it's really God's gifts given to you minus the interference you put in front of it. Mm-hmm. So you have the fear of going all in and not making it. That's really one of the more powerful differentiators, is who is willing to go all in, knowing that there's a chance, the full acceptance of any outcome. And if it doesn't work out, did you just get right back up off the mat and go again? Where other people literally, failure wrecks them so badly, I'm not good enough. And the imposter syndrome lands square on their forehead after their first attempt of all in failure. It wrecks them. So when you think about one of the most important traits, and something that I put into my TED Talk, is resiliency. How do you train resiliency, one, for yourself, but what are you doing for your son and your daughter when it comes to, because right now you're in this awesome moment of being able to spend a lot of time with your son playing baseball. It's just like I had the same thing with my boys playing golf. And, we spell love, it's called Time. And you're pouring that time in, and that's something that'll never go away. But the resiliency of high achievers is it's one of the high ceiling marks for me, because everybody is capable of going all in at least once. But most of the time, there can only be one winner, and that means there's a bunch of people that didn't win. Who can get up off the mat? What are you doing there?
Well, I'm going to use you as an example. Look at what you're doing in 2025 and who you're doing it with. And, before you did your TED Talk, it was almost like God has to remove things from your life to make room for the next thing.
Yeah.
And that was like the story of your life for a couple of years there, where like it was like you just kept getting hit. But what stuck out to me about you is the room that you're in now, you always expected to be there. All right. So the room, you were made for that room. You just hadn't gotten in it yet. Okay. So when you got the chance to be in that room, it was like, yeah, this guy belongs here. And you're a made guy. Now you never lose your spot.
Yeah.
But how many people get in the room and they cave? They don't rise to the occasion because of their own self-image, and they never get the shot to get back in there. Right. So, nobody in the big leagues didn't expect to be in the big leagues. Nobody in the PGA didn't expect to be in the PGA. Nobody doing TV with David Meltzer didn't expect to be doing TV with David Meltzer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I'd like to stay there for just a minute, man, because like you, and I'm going to talk to you about this soon, when you come back to my show.
Yeah.
Cause dude, like I've been watching you do it, and it was just like, well, it's just a matter of time. For me, it was just no doubt that you were going to be there. It's just how it was going to play out,
Well, you're very kind. I mean, at the end of the day, I think golf helps train resiliency because the game is built with failure, like literally attached to it. Mm-hmm. Because like really the thing that made Tiger so spectacular was his bad was just better than everybody else. And he was like, you'd see him react to a shot that was he just with disdain. And as he hit it, blankety blank, and one arm off the golf club, and then it would land to like 19 feet from the hole. And you're like, what was he so upset about? Because his standard is so high that his bad infuriates him, just like a bad infuriates everybody. But it's so refined that even his bad looks better than most people's good. And that's where I'm a big believer is like, we all start doing something with hope in mind. Mm-hmm. Like that one time we just do something for the first time. It's like, wow, that was fun. I'd love to do that again. And then you find a level of passion in it. You go get some information to get better at it, lessons or education, what have you. And now you believe you can do it because you've learned how to do it. But to know that you're going to do it means you've done it so much and refined it so well that you can't do it wrong. And to me, when I figured that part out for golf, every time I got knocked down, and there were some really big haymakers that I had to take, I just knew that I had to get back up. And if I'm not dead, I can get back up.
Fact.
And it might hurt and I might be broken, but I'm up. And every time I think about that fight between Deontay Wilder and that Andy Ruiz guy, who he took a punch that nearly knocked him completely out, got up on 8. They weren't even quite sure if they were going to keep the fight going.
Yeah.
And then about 50 seconds later in the fight, he hit Wilder with a punch and literally staggered him, and the fight was over. And it looked like it was over for that guy, but he got back up. And anytime you feel like it's over, but you still have life in you, you better get back up, because it will never let you down, even though you feel like you're let down.
You're only one phone call, one conversation, one introduction away from your life totally changing. And for me, to go back to answer your question that you asked a few moments ago, it was, unfortunately for me and my wife, my 30s were spent, there was a lot of soul searching. However, what made me snap into place or really like make the commitment to myself to do, I always felt like I was called to do something, but I was almost like waiting on somebody to see it and just be like, here you go, and hand it to me, when you got to earn it. So it was my son that made me look in the mirror. Raising him, the responsibility of doing it right, made me look in the mirror and made me start asking questions, rising up to the challenges and the occasions. Because at the end of the day, I do want to spend time with him. I didn't want to create a life where I can't be at his ball games. I can't be at those places. I wanted to have the choice. I didn't want to have to ask for permission to go be a good dad,
And, I've been, the greatest gift of all is the like your son cannot wait for you to get home to be a part of the baseball arena that he's in. Like my kids literally will stand on the first tee until I can get there and turn down multiple friend rounds of golf because they can't wait to play with their dad. Like of all the things, Virg, what's the most important thing that you've put into the world? is that I fostered a situation for my kids that they can't wait to be with me at 19 and 17. Right. And I can tell that's exactly what you're doing with your son. And it's so cool to watch because I'm a little bit further in the game than you are because my kids are older. It's like, you think that it's awesome now. The older they get and you keep that, it's just like the greatest gift of them all, because essentially the stats are really hurtful, right? You're going to spend 85% of the time that you will ever spend with your children before the age of 18. My as soon as I heard that stat, the first thing that I wanted to do was I'm going to extend it to maybe it's 65%, because I'm going to cultivate an environment that my kids can't wait to be a part of.
That's it.
And I can tell that that's what you're doing. And, and I know that your dad did that for you too.
Oh yeah.
And but at the end of the day, we have this weird thing where we want to step away from what our family did, see if we can do it ourselves, make our own way. And then we find out, like, oh, wait a second, that was a pretty good program we were on.
I know.
And you refine it and you just make it a little bit better, because that's our job. Your dad would not want you to do what you're doing as good as him. He'd want you to take everything he taught you plus everything you know to amplify it. And that really is one of the coolest things to do in your life, man.
It was almost like, I'm still having my turn. My son's going to have his turn.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure he's ready. And the only thing that I regret when I look back on it, because again, we're extremely blessed and we have so much to be grateful for. But, and we learned that gratefulness and you can't be grateful and be entitled to something at the same time.
That's
right?
exactly right.
So, but, with my son, and I'm sure the daughter will be a little bit different. She's so young now. The only thing I regret is that, like, we could have started sooner. We could have begun preparing for that sooner. And some of the sacrifices that we've all made weren't necessary had I've taken better action earlier in life.
And somewhere along the line, another really important piece, how have you gone about forgiving yourself for taking longer than you had hoped to become the person that you are? Because at the end of the day, it's not about when, it's just if.
I became grateful for the loss. I became grateful because that loss generated a lesson, which I couldn't get better without. I couldn't solve. I needed a problem to solve.
Yeah.
And those losses gave me the problems I needed to solve, just like I learned in sports.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like when the Me Too movement was kind of blowing up during COVID, I interviewed 20 of the top female CEOs in Nashville.
Wow.
And all of them, I was trying to figure out if they had to deal with a lot of the things that Me Too was bringing up. And every single one of them did not, which was really interesting, because I was trying to dig up something. And across the board, one of the things that they all had in common was they all competed in sports early on. And that kind of goes back to all the other coaches that I've been around. As soon as you stop competing, life is going to pound on you.
Boom.
And they all just said, I just competed all my life. So, and didn't really faze me that if I was going up against a guy or not for a position, because all I was going to do is give everything that I had.
Yeah, man.
And if I did everything that I was supposed to do, I was going to get that job. But some people don't have the confidence,
no doubt,
to prepare like that. So they try to find other ways to get to the top, if you know what I mean, Virgil. And I'm like, interesting statement. And so like that to me is like, that's a powerful place to be, is that competing early on in your life is so important. And you think back to and I would love to hear like maybe your favorite lesson or two of that you've learned while going through life, that you had a head start on the resiliency and the perseverance because you played really high end baseball.
I learned I learned how to make better choices. I think at the end of the day, my wife and I's main job as a parent, specifically for our son, is to teach him to have a relationship and love Jesus Christ. And then how do you learn how to make good choices that are in your best interest based on what you feel like you're called to do? If you can do those two things and that's it, you kind of knocked it out of the park, right?
Yeah.
So learning to make choices was huge, but like the biggest thing is like I had to get comfortable with myself. The reason that I treated my wife the way our relationship was for probably the first 10 years is because I didn't realize I was trying to bring her down to the level I thought I was at. I've always felt like she was up here and I was down here, and I was really insecure about that and was either too insecure to admit it or didn't realize it. And either way, it doesn't matter. So again, just I started to question things like why? Why do I believe what I believe? Why do I believe who I believe? Where's the information that I'm getting? And that was another thing that I learned from Brad Lee. He tells the funniest story. He says, if you want to change your beliefs, just get new information. And the example is, he says, I used to think fire wasn't hot. I stuck my hand in it. I got some new information. It's such a funny little story. But again, we grew up I'm in the generation where I remember life before the internet, and now I'm thriving. I can thrive in it, and I remember both. And that's a rare perspective.
Yeah,
it's a very rare perspective. I come from a world where my parents trusted every item in the grocery store to have good, safe, healthy ingredients. And that if the doctor said something, there was no motivation for them that wouldn't be ethical or in line with, helping me get better, whatever it was. It's a different world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And information is coming out every day, more and more at scale from, think about it. 20 years ago, who'd you get your information from? Well, now if you just scroll Instagram for 10 minutes, you heard from 1,000 times more people than you used to hear from. And some of that stuff, if the quality production is good enough, you might just believe it just because it looked good enough and sounded good enough.